As you might expect, as a mobile network, we do use mobile techniques quite extensively to collect customer feedback. But today's presentation is really much more about combining both attitudinal and behavioural data from a variety of different sources to gain insights that will really drive decision making within the organisation. So mobile's part of it, but we're very data collection agnostic. So what I'm going to take you through today is a bit of explanation about EE, who we are, and particularly around our service ambition, and then some work to begin with to link overall perceptions with customer behaviour, and then more importantly, getting down to the really granular detail and understanding the impact of different touchpoint experiences on perceptions. So first of all, just to give a bit more introduction, for those in the audience that aren't familiar with EE, EE is a new mobile brand that was created last year in the UK following the merger between Orange and T-Mobile. It was the first brand to launch superfast 4G services in the UK, and across our 3 brands now, we have a total of some 27 million customers. When we did launch, we took a very strong position on being network leader in the UK with the launch of our 4G services, and now we've very much got an ambition to complement that with being number 1 for service too, and that's across all the channels, whether it's high street, on the phone or digital channels. It's quite a bold ambition, and we do very much recognise that currently there's a little bit of a way to go to close the gap from where we currently stand. So because of that, it's really essential that we effectively prioritise our investment activity to improve the experiences that really matter for our customers, and ultimately the ones that are going to prevent them churning away from our network. So in this paper, Ashok and I are going to really share some of the modelling work we've done to really help us with this task and get us under the skin of what's going on from a customer experience point of view. I guess it's fair to say it's not a really easy task, however, and certainly as a mobile network, the customer journeys that our customers have are really complicated, and no two are really the same. And also we're quite dependent on some third parties for some of those customer journeys. So for example, many of our customers will join us through a third-party retailer on the high street. The device manufacturers obviously control quite a lot of the experience as well. So understanding, what the experiences our customers have, and particularly what matters, really isn't very easy, and it is somewhat like unpicking spaghetti, which is where we needed some help. So to simplify things, ultimately, what we're trying to understand is all the relationships that I've got here, and I use this sort of framework really to sort of try and bring it to life. On the left-hand side, therefore, we've got all the various different touchpoint experiences, which might be customer service, it might be the network experience, it might be billing and so forth. And really what we see is that the overall customer experience is the sum total of all of those individual touchpoint experiences. And that's what determines the relationship our customers have with us. And we can obviously measure this in a variety of ways. It could be through a CSAT score, might use MaPS or whatever, but any overall relationship score is what we're measuring there. But the important thing to do is then link that overall perception score, into sort of actual customer behaviour, million customers. When we did launch, we took a very strong position on being network leader in the UK with the launch of our 4G services. And now we've very much got an ambition to complement that with being number 1 for service too. And that's across all the channels, whether it's high street, on the phone or digital channels. It's quite a bold ambition, and we do very much recognise that currently there's a little bit of a way to go to close the gap from where we currently stand. So because of that, it's really essential that we effectively prioritise our investment activity to improve the experiences that really matter for our customers, and ultimately the ones that are going to prevent them churning away from our network. So in this paper, Ashok and I are going to really share some of the modelling work we've done to really help us with this task and get us under the skin of what's going on from a customer experience point of view. I guess it's fair to say it's not a really easy task, however, and certainly as a mobile network, the customer journeys that our customers have are really complicated, and no two are really the same. And also we're quite dependent on some third parties for some of those customer journeys. So for example, many of our customers will join us through a third-party retailer on the high street. The device manufacturers obviously control quite a lot of the experience as well. So understanding what the experiences our customers have, and particularly what matters, really isn't very easy, and it is somewhat like unpicking spaghetti, which is where we needed some help. So to simplify things, I mean, ultimately, what we're trying to understand is all the relationships that I've got here. And I use this sort of framework really to sort of try and bring it to life. On the left-hand side, therefore, we've got all the various different touchpoint experiences, which might be customer service, it might be the network experience, it might be billing, and so forth. And really what we see is that the overall customer experience is the sum total of all of those individual touchpoint experiences. And that's what determines the relationship our customers have with us. And we can obviously measure this in a variety of ways. It could be through a CSAT score, might use MaPS or whatever, but any overall relationship score is what we're measuring there. But the important thing to do is then link that overall perception score, into sort of actual customer behaviour, because that really allows us to translate that into value. So what we're trying to do is understand all the relationships and linkages between these different variables within this framework here. And being a mobile network, it's fair to say that we certainly have no shortage of data. There's plenty of it. It's making sense of it all, which is a challenge for us. And it's probably worth just sort of classifying. Ashok might talk about this a bit more in a few minutes, but we've got a whole different variety of sources of data that we can use. So what we consider to be operational data, which is information we can draw from our internal systems about the experiences that we deliver to our customers. So this could be the number of dropped calls that a customer experiences, or how long, for example, they have to wait before they actually get through when they will try to call the call centre. A whole range of different information there. We've also got our transactional or event-based surveys. We regularly talk to our customers about recent touchpoint experiences. This could be about the network experience they've had, or a recent call into customer services, or a visit to our website. And this is where a lot of the mobile research comes in. Obviously, mobile is a great technique for collecting this sort of quick, in-the-moment feedback, and we use mobiles extensively here. We then have what we might consider to be our overall relationship survey, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. We have a survey called Customer Focus, which is very much about measuring the overall relationship customers have with us. And finally, all of these things feed into what we can call outcome measures. This could be about ARPU, which is our measure of revenue. It might be around sort of churn rate and so forth. So a whole different and varied set of data that we're feeding into the mix here. And I'll just tell you a little bit more about our Customer Focus programme, which, as I said, is our sort of more strategic programme to measure the overall relationship our customers have with us. It's run by TNS, which is part of the Kantar group, and it gives us a really good understanding of our customers' likelihood to recommend us, and importantly, what the key drivers of that recommendation are. We use it very much to measure the range of touch points we have, and to benchmark our performance versus the competition. I'm sure many people will be familiar with this type of study. It's probably not that revolutionary. So I'm going to start off describing how we link some of that survey data with behaviour overall. And again, if you look at going back to our framework, we're really looking on the right-hand side of this, sort of understanding the overall relationship.
Okay, thanks, Hilary. Thanks, everybody. So I'd like to cover actually. Thanks, Hilary. Thanks, everybody. So I'd like to cover actually two things in this second part of the presentation. The first is to, as the title here says, get a little more granular in terms of exactly what kinds of models we were in a position to develop based on this work. obviously, as Hilary mentioned, there's a wealth of data, and it's important to understand how the data can fit together into one consistent, holistic picture. The second part of what I'd like to cover is to help you understand how we actually deliver the results within the organization. Obviously, the model is only a means to an end, and for this sort of work to have a long shelf life and really be actionable within the organization, we need to provide tools that enable this sort of, right? So here is sort of a modeling framework which generally aligns with the different types of data sources that Hilary talked about, but has some arrows in addition to those. So we have here 4 sort of broad categories. Over on the left, the 2 boxes are the types of information that come from the surveys, right? So we have the customer experience box in the top right. It's really the core of the whole exercise. We collect a set of detailed evaluations around different aspects of the customer experience, network coverage, satisfaction with call center brand. Again, probably nothing revolutionary there. I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with. And these things ultimately feed into some sort of headline metrics, KPIs that ultimately are tracked closely and monitored by the organization. In this case, as Hilary mentioned, likelihood to recommend is a really important metric that's tracked. And in fact, NPS, which is sort of derived from likelihood to recommend. Now, we also have a lot of other rich information. We have these operational metrics that relate to things like number of dropped calls a customer might have had, the amount of time that people have to wait before their call to a customer care center is answered, that's tracked, quality or reliability of a data session that people might have had, and such. And really, it's important to understand the impact that these have on the one hand, on these headline KPIs, and in fact, on particular aspects of the customer experience. So the number of dropped calls presumably will give you a poor feeling of the network coverage, right? Which would then translate into a lower likelihood to recommend. The operational measures also have a direct and tangible impact on various behavioral outcomes. Your likelihood to continue to stay with the provider over time, so churn, your likelihood to upgrade, in fact, the level of spend you have with the company and such. And so our objective is to analyze and quantify precisely as many of these relationships as possible, as the data would admit, right? And then to fold them all into a scenario building tool that will allow the user to do a variety of what-if analyses. Okay. All right, so here are some examples of different types of relationships that we can model. Again, this is just illustrative. Over on the left, you see a variety of customer experience dimensions feeding into an overall likelihood to recommend. On the right-hand side, you see many different examples of various survey-related metrics feeding into database metrics, or, so for instance, the one at the bottom, likelihood to recommend, impacting your decision to churn or upgrade, which in turn can be translated into some sort of financial outcome. We have some customer service metrics, operational measures that impact your likelihood to recommend. We have dropped call, and there's many more that are not shown here. So just some examples. Okay, and here are the types of things we observe. So the example with churn Hilary mentioned, we take the results from this model, we make some assumptions through a financial model around what a particular unit of churn actually means in terms of revenues, considering the historical profile of people who have churned in terms of their revenue profiles, people who upgrade, what happens to people who are sort of out of contract for a while, et cetera. We're able to build a financial model that translates the churn estimates into actual values. Drop calls, FCR stands for first call resolution, whether your initial call to the customer call center addressed the underlying issue that you called about. And you can see the relationships in general are quite nonlinear. The churn one is not as nonlinear perhaps as we might have thought, although there is a flattening out beyond a certain point. The dropped calls in FCR definitely have, the dropped call in particular, if the proportion is very low, it doesn't matter, but once you get above a certain critical level, things start getting really bad. Okay. All right, and this is sort of a introduction to a simulation tool that we build, that we really package all of the results from our model into, and this is something that's delivered to users within the EE organization for them to run various kinds of what-if analyses. So this is just a interface page. The brand in this case is Orange. There are differences between Orange and T-Mobile, which we capture through different models. There are various kinds of models that the user can simulate. So that the one on top relates to different customer experience metrics. And then the two at the bottom relate to dropped calls, other operational measures. And again, this is just an example. So what actually happens underneath the simulation is, if you focus on the bottom portion of the table here, you see customer experience metrics arrayed over on the left. The column labeled current score, and this data is illustrative at this point. The column labeled current score shows on a 10-point scale how EE performs today on each of those dimensions. What people can do with this is to modify the column labeled simulated score. So for instance, you see a 7.3 under brand. That says that what happens if we introduce improvements that result in people giving us an evaluation of 7.3 on brand as opposed to 6.1, right? And so you change that over on the bottom, and then on top you can look at the results of the simulation. So the top row says that if you indeed were to improve the score on brand by 1.2 units from 6.1 to 7.3, you would realize an improvement in likelihood to recommend going from 85 to 95, which is a plus 10-point change, right? And what that does, that in turn impacts the upgrade and churn in a very favorable manner. The upgrade percent has gone up by 5 percentage points. The churn has gone down by 2 percentage points, which in turn results in a significant and substantial revenue improvement, both at a per customer level and overall. Okay. And there are various things around this that can be flexed. The financial assumptions can be flexed as better data, more data comes in. For comparison, we can set scores to scores that are best in the industry versus worst in the industry and such. Okay. So let me stop there, and Hilary will let us know how these results were used.
So I think, hopefully we've just given you a little whistle-stop tour through some fairly complicated modelling that we've done. But essentially, the key things to take out from this, first of all, I think, the ability to put a commercial value on customer experience improvements by linking the perception data with actual churn behaviour really helps in driving customer experience up the corporate agenda and giving it a real focus within the organisation. By using the models to drive customer experience prioritisation, we've been able to really quantify the revenue impact of different potential actions, and that really helps us to inform the resource allocation decisions that we're making. But I think the important thing is bringing in some of this operational metrics really helped us to pinpoint in a very granular way the specific activity that we need to do to drive up those improvements. So we can get down to the level of going back to the business and saying, for example, we know that if, for example, a customer is receiving more than 5% of dropped calls, that's having a massive impact on their churn behaviour, and we believe that the financial revenue impact of it is so many pounds. And that really does sort of help us make that sort of very relevant to the business and get them to take action. So It's really the granular level of detail that the business always cries out for, which I think through this modelling work we have finally been able to give back to the business. So I think that's really what Ashok and I wanted to talk to you about. Again, I think open to questions if anyone wants to sort of find out anything more.
Thank you, Ashok. Thank you, Hilary. That was excellent.